How goes the struggle? Okay, we're on the air. Good evening and welcome to the Newmarket Zoning Board of Adjustment meeting for Monday, April 1st, 2019. And the first order of business, as always, is the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge
allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Before I go further, I just want to say welcome to our new alternate members, Connor Crowley and Jonathan Sack. Thank you very much for volunteering. We really appreciate the help. And people who watch the ZBA on a regular basis know that we need all the help we can get. couple of minor procedural things, just to make you guys aware. We don't discuss the substance of any applications outside of meetings. The only emails you get are communications for scheduling and stuff like that. And if you do need to send an email, copy Sue Jordan. That way, if there's a right to know request, she has it, and then she can deal with it. Alternates are free to ask questions, participate in the discussions at any time. I sit in the middle, so if I don't see you, just say, "Hey, knucklehead, I want to speak," and I'll call on you.
Okay.
So that's all. Generally, if an application comes in, we assume that everybody has made an effort to go drive by the property. We do from time to time. If it's a complex application, we'll go take a formal view. We'll schedule that. But generally, just familiarize yourself with the property. And if you think a view is necessary, then we'll talk about that at the meeting. Other than that, you've got your orange planning and land use law regulation book. Hopefully you've memorized it by now. There'll be a quiz later. And other than that, we'll just pick up things as we go along. Okay. Review and approval of minutes of February 11th, 2019. I had a couple of minor changes, and I'll just jump in and say what they are. On page 11, line 4, it says, James Drago stated his issue was that it was not in alliance. I think it should be compliance rather than alliance. See what I'm saying?
Where I have,
How come you guys have different minutes than I do?
Because Sue has a different
Turn
version
back
of
to
Word
the-
than I do, and so
No,
when
turn back a page,
when
page
she
10.
prints stuff that I do, it's always gets out of line.
Page 10.
page 10. Page 10.
It's there.
Oh, compliance.
On mine, it's on page 11. It's at the very bottom of page 10 on some of these things.
Line 41. Oh,
Line 41.
yeah.
And then on mine, page 11, line 22. It's the very last paragraph. It says relative comparison. It should be relevant rather than relative. Line 17 on page 11. Relevant instead of relative.
Yeah.
So those are my suggested changes. So any other suggested changes to the minutes from February 11th? I'll entertain a motion to accept the minutes as amended.
Make a motion to accept as amended.
Do I have a second?
That's second.
Thank you. Mr. Drago, any further discussion? All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Thank you very
I
much.
abstain.
Thank you, Wayne. That's right, you were away. And our regular business item for this evening is the application of Derek Fisher, 96 Newmarket LLC. Public hearing for an application for variances from sections 32-86 and 32-89 of the Newmarket zoning ordinance to permit 2 residential units on a .05 acre lot where 6 units per acre is allowed. 2 units previously existed within this building. The lot is located at 96 Main Street, tax map U2, lot 30 in the M2 zone. And this, as I understand it, is the former location of Jeremy's Pizza. So the way we work it is if the applicant or the applicant's representative step forward, make a presentation, then we'll open it for public comment. And then when public comment is done, give you an opportunity to respond to whatever comes up in public comment. And then we'll close public comment and the board will deliberate and make a decision. That's typically the way we work it. Okay?
That's okay. No worries. Thank you.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman, members of the zoning board. My name is Corey Caldwell from TF Moran. We're a civil engineering and surveying firm located in Portsmouth, New Hampshire.
I'm sorry, sir. I didn't catch your last name because of the papers.
Caldwell.
Caldwell, thank you.
With me tonight is our owner and applicant in the corner in the front row, Derek Fisher, and Brenda Colbo and Eric Salovich, both of TF Moran. What Brenda is passing around is the same information that was submitted earlier, just in the form of color. So that if I refer to a color on either the TV screen or the large board over here, you can follow along with us. So Mr. Fisher owns the property at 96 Newmarket Avenue. The property is located in the M2 zoning district, and it contains about 22 feet of frontage on Main Street. The property is 2,046 square feet in size. It contains a 2.5-story building, a picture of which is up here on the easel. On the first floor is the former restaurant space, and on the second floor and third floor is residential space. Mr. Fisher also owns the Wingett's restaurants. They're located in Dover and Portsmouth. Wingett's is a seacoast wing and butchery shop, if you're not familiar with it, established in 2007 and specializes, like its name, in chicken wings. Mr. Fisher hopes to bring his third location of Wingett's to this Newmarket residence, which is the former location of Jeremy's Pizza and Deli. The second floor of this property contains residential living space. So there's the first floor restaurant, a second floor, and then a third floor, and that second and third floor contains residential living space. In the building, there are 2 living rooms, 2 kitchens, 2 bathrooms, 4 bedrooms, and it formerly existed as 2 residential dwelling units. One of the prior owners abandoned the use as dwelling units, and therefore it became a non-conforming use. So it reverted back because of that abandonment into a single-family dwelling unit. Mr. Fisher, as owner of the 96 Newmarket LLC, wants to revert it back to 2 residential units from 1. All the infrastructure's in place. There's 2 points of egress. There is separate meters, and there's, as I said, kitchen space, bathroom space, all the adequate rooms necessary for 2 residential dwelling units. This, however, going to 2 residential dwelling units in this M2 zone requires a variance pursuant to Section 3, Section 3286 of your zoning ordinance. Since the lot contains 2,046 square feet, it is relatively small. Only 1 unit would be allowed under this density requirement in Section 3286. Since all the living requirements are currently in place for 2 residential units, and there's no major construction necessary for the conversion, all the infrastructure is in place, we find that it's a reasonable change. There are separate access doors for each unit. There's separate meters in place, and each unit has its own bathroom and kitchen space. Further, each unit has 2 bedrooms of its own and would contain over 900 square feet each. There are, in the back of the property, shown as the gray on your color drawing, back here, 2 existing parking spaces. We realize this is only enough for 1 unit because under your zoning ordinance you need 2 spaces per unit, but there are, however, many additional off-site parking spaces within 500 feet of the property, and the Elm Street lot, which is also within 500 feet of the property. We understand in conversations with the police there are spaces available there. So if we're successful in obtaining this variance, the next step would be to apply for those 2 spaces of that Elm Street lot, which could be used for the second residential unit. In our application, we describe 5 criterion for this variance. We've typed those up, we've put them in the application. I can read them, or alternatively, I can describe them briefly. Certainly, I'll do whatever the preference of the board is.
Our preference is to not read us stuff that you've given us in writing, but if there's information that you want to emphasize or some additional information that you want to present, this is your opportunity, but please don't just read it to us.
Sure.
And if, for my benefit, if you could especially address the special conditions and how those special conditions distinguish it from other properties, which is the fifth criterion.
Okay.
If you could address that in particular, that's very helpful.
Sure. So I'll just skim the first two criteria. We presented those together, which is granting the variance would not be contrary to the public interest, and if the variance were granted, the spirit of the ordinance would be observed. I'm sure as zoning board members, you're all familiar with the Malachi Glen case, which takes these two criteria together, and essentially that case said that it must be determined that if granting it would unduly and to a marked degree conflict with the ordinance such that it violates the ordinance basic zoning objectives, mere conflict with the zoning ordinance is not enough. So it established that criteria, if you will, for those first two. Granting the variance would not be contrary to the public interest, and if the variance were granted, the spirit of the ordinance would be observed. We believe that since this building has existed for many years as two separate units with restaurant space below, that it doesn't really alter the essential character of this location at all. It still promotes the mixed uses in the downtown. It still observes the spirit of the ordinance, and the M2 district is specifically designed for this type of use, this mixed-use residential and restaurant. So for those reasons, we don't feel that it's contrary or it still observes the spirit of the ordinance. Criterion 3, granting the variance would do substantial justice because the existing building has existed for quite some time as two separate units, and there's very little work to be done to make these into two units. Some minor cosmetics on the inside, if you will, but everything is in place for this to go to two units in a very short period of time. There's already a number of existing non-conforming lots in that district and in close proximity to this building. Criterion 4, if the variance were granted, the values of the surrounding properties would not be diminished. And because there's no changes proposed to the exterior of that building, there's really no essential change in the value of surrounding properties or it in of itself. So again, minor interior cosmetics, there'd probably be a new sign placed on the outside, but nothing substantial. The building would still have the same look and feel as it does today, so that certainly would not diminish any of the surrounding property values. Criterion 5, one that the chairman alluded to, unnecessary hardship owing to special conditions of the property that distinguish it from others. Denial of the variance would result in an unnecessary hardship. And that's taken into a couple parts now. The first part is no fair or substantial relationship exists between the general public purpose of the ordinance provision and the specific application of that provision to this property. You're all familiar with it. You've heard it many times. In this case, your ordinance says that its primarily purpose is to guide the character of growth, development, and change in order to provide for the public health, safety, society, and general welfare. We maintain that returning this building to two units as it previously existed for many years does not alter this purpose. And secondly, the proposed use is a reasonable one because, again, the lot previously had two residential units in the downtown village area. It provides an ideal place for high density, and it gives opportunities to live and work in this area while still providing access to public transportation. So it's kind of in keeping with the surrounding properties, and for those reasons, we maintain that this is a reasonable use. So there's essentially that concludes my presentation. In summary, it's existed this way for many years in the past. There's very little change necessary for that building. It's strictly just a zoning snafu, if you will, that says your density requires 6 units per acre. In this case, because that lot is so small, we can't meet that density requirements. And for all the reasons stated, we're seeking your relief for a variance to allow this property to not change, but go back to its former condition as two separate units. Mr. Fisher and I will try to address any questions that the board may have.
Okay. Before we get to that point, what I'm going to do is open the floor for public comment, public discussion. Seeing none, I'm going to close the public discussion portion of the meeting. And are there any questions? Before we do that, all the abutters received notice in timely fashion? Thank you. Steve, did you?
Sure. This is a request. What's the size of the lot? 2,018 square feet?
2046.
2,046. Okay. How big are the surrounding lots? Big or small? Do you know the size?
Yeah, there are, per the
What?
tax map, the lots on either side, or the lot to the west is similar size. The lot to the east, bear with me, I've got a copy of the tax map. I can tell you, or I can show you pictorially how they compare
Sure.
to this lot.
I think what we're going to find is that they're all tiny.
Well, and you know why I'm asking, right?
So you're welcome to pass this around, or just ask for it. Actually, you can keep it. There's 4 lots. This lot is the highlighted lot, and there's 4 lots of almost the exact same size as this lot. Two to the
Okay.
west and 1 to the east.
John, you want to take a look at this too?
And then this is your tax map that shows all of that area, the downtown M2 zone,
Thanks.
with some lots even smaller than this.
Okay.
Welcome to pass
And
it
that's
around.
tax map U2,
Correct.
just for the record. Know the area well.
Yeah, I do too. If you bring your magnifying glass, you could read it.
Wait a minute now, Steve.
20 years ago.
I'm good. Yeah, that was. I just wanted to know what the. I was trying to find. Okay, I'm
There's-
good for now.
A number of very small lots, some of which are irregular in shape and some of which are regular in shape in the area, but that's our downtown. Any other questions?
I have a couple.
Mr. Daigle?
What was the mechanism that was used to discontinue the unit? Was it, you called it an abandonment, was it an abandonment, or did they go before a board and say, we don't want them anymore, or do you know?
We're told by the building inspector that was abandoned. I don't know for what period of time. He wrote us a memo that said, because those units were abandoned, I think it meant, I think what he was saying is not lived in for a period of time. Therefore, that vested use is no longer valid.
Yeah.
And how many units does the tax map show?
Tax map doesn't show.
I mean,
No.
the tax card.
That's card.
It shows 1 unit on the second floor.
One unit on the second floor. And do you know how many water and sewer assessments you've got against that lot? Because each dwelling unit on the water and sewer side gets a fee assessed to it. So do you know how many you've got in there? Is it 2 residential and a commercial, or 1 residential and a commercial?
I don't know, Derek, do you know?
My name is Derek Fisher from 96 Main Street in Newmarket. I appreciate you listening to our, our situation here. But I don't have any of the sewer or any of that information as I just purchased the property at the end of February. So I don't have any of that information on hand.
Well, I'll tell you that the service used to go through Central and then into that building.
I know.
Yeah, so I don't know whether that's been
Well,
discontinued or not, but it used to go right through here.
What I'm getting at is, if he's been paying service to the water and sewer departments for 2 residential and commercial, then maybe he doesn't have a case of abandonment.
Oh, I see.
Well, I think I think they changed the ordinance. I think we asked
You asked us.
We asked to change the
ordinance,
ordinance. It used to
and
be
we changed
indefinite.
it to 24 months. So
Yes.
if it's been abandoned for more than 24
That's
months.
not what I'm saying. What I'm
But
saying
I'm telling
is
you what the
that
ordinance
if a person
says.
is paying water and sewer fees for units, then it's not, in my opinion, it's
Well,
not abandoned.
they're taxed as one
Yeah, but-
unit.
That's fine. Tax and.
And nobody knows, we'll have to get it checked out. If you would like that information, I could ask the
Well,
water
I'm
and
just asking, I've got no problem, I like the idea of what's going on. The other question I've got is Wingett's contingent on getting this unit, this second unit approved?
No, no, I've purchased the property and I'm already in construction phase. I have a building permit with the town, and I'm already in renovation right now to open the restaurant downstairs.
Okay,
Yep.
that's all the questions I've got, thank you.
Yep, thank you.
Any other questions? Steve?
No, I can't think of any more. I'm good. Buildings are about the same, you know.
Yeah, for me, and no one has to agree, for me, the unique condition is that this property is fully equipped and ready to go with 2 residential units. And it would be, in my mind, somewhat wasteful and unnecessarily wasteful under the circumstances to not recognize that as a condition. Whether it distinguishes it from other properties in the area, I don't know. But I think some discretion in this instance is called for in my mind.
So, is the reason that he has to ask for the variance because of that abandonment period? Because,
Yes.
okay, so,
Years ago, we had an application come in where the property had been abandoned for well over 20 years, 30 years. And the ordinance just didn't say. So we suggested to the planning board or the council, whoever the powers that be, that they put in some kind of a time period, just to make it a little easier for us.
sure, yep,
So they chose 2 years, and that's what it says.
okay.
I don't know how long this has been abandoned or why it was abandoned or anything.
What does abandonment, how does that impact the board's decision? What does that classification?
Because if a prior use has been abandoned, then, and somebody wants to reinstate it, then it's like it never ever existed previously. They have to start over and meet all the criteria, whereas if it's kind of grandfathered as an existing use, then we don't have any jurisdiction over it or anything to say about it.
I see.
So that's the thrust of it. So while I don't,
I'm gonna make a motion in a second.
all right,
And honestly, I don't see anything wrong with it. It was just, I was curious.
yeah,
because
I mean, I'm sensitive to Steve's question.
I don't see anything wrong with it. I'm willing to support it, but the hardship prong is light in this application. It just is. I mean, we need to find that special circumstances of the property distinguish it from other properties in the area. And I don't see anything wrong with what Mr. Fisher's trying to do. You know, they had 2 units in there before. It's not a big deal. There's nobody speaking against it, and I'll support it in this circumstance. But I just want to reserve the right for future applications to weigh the facts as they come in a different manner.
Yeah, I totally agree with that, Steve. I'm totally sympathetic to that. Like I said, I think some discretion is called for
Yeah.
in this particular instance.
I agree.
And making no promises as to what we would do in a different application under different circumstances. But it is completely set up and ready to go for 2 residential units as it is.
Yeah, I think that's,
And I think that whether or not the place next door is exactly the same, I don't know.
I'm willing to support that as a special circumstance for this application.
Okay. Mr. Daigle.
I make a motion to grant the variance based on the unique nature of the parcel. That being, it has 2 residential units that are currently ready for occupancy, not requiring any additional major construction. Making the owner bring the building into compliance would be wasteful and I believe contrary to the intent of the ordinance.
I second that.
Further discussion?
right there.
All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? The ayes have it. Thank you. Thank you. We appreciate the quality of the presentation. It's very helpful. Yes. You can have your tax map back if you want it. It's referred to in the record, so if it's necessary.
Thank you very much.
The Main Street project.
No,
I know it. Because what's going on?
Pretty well with construction, and I was looking for June
yeah.
completed, but now it looks like it's gonna be a little bit earlier than that, so. We're just gonna keep plugging away, I'm hands-on, so I'm in there working every day too.
Good, welcome.
Pretty beat up, thanks.
Thank you.
To the 10.
Thank you.
Okay, the only item of other business I can think of is we have that.
You have to appoint the chair and the vice chair.
What?
You have, don't you?
Do we? Is it that time
We
again?
did that, didn't we?
Did you do that at the last meeting? I think it was.
No, we did it. We had Bob. We had Bob appointed vice chair a few months ago.
Wasn't that long ago?
No, it was a year ago.
Was it?
No.
Been only a couple of months.
I don't
We
think,
had a
I
town
don't,
meeting 2 or 3 weeks ago, so.
That's
we
right.
need to appoint a new chair and vice chair.
Well, I'm more than happy to. Good night. Anybody who wants to be chair is more than welcome to do it.
I nominate Chairman Hawkins to be
Thank
chair.
you.
no, thanks.
Nominate me.
And I nominate Bob for vice.
Make it easy.
Do we have a second for the nominations?
Yep,
I
second.
second and third it.
All right. All those in favor of carrying on with the current regime, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Hey, what do I have to do to get out of here?
Make sure we can forget that.
No, okay.
Carry out in a box.
The other thing is the seminar,
Yes, the planning conference is June 1st.
June 1st.
And we have money in the budget for ZBA members to attend to cover your travel and your registration.
Yeah, it's a good idea, particularly for our new members to do that. And if we can put together a carpool of folks and go up there, it's really cool to hear how other people do it. And you get the latest updates on the case law and stuff like that. The Supreme Court seems to crank out a ZBA opinion every month or so. And so you get the latest updates. You go up to Concord. And so if folks are interested in doing that, let's coordinate that through Sue. And then we can figure out if there's an appropriate carpooling arrangement we can come up with. And if you can't do it, that's okay too.
I'm interested, but there's some personal stuff going on at home that makes me committing to it a little difficult.
All right.
At the 11th hour, I mean.
Let's everyone check your calendars. We'll be back here on the 15th anyway. We'll be back here in 2 weeks anyway. The way it works with the ZBA is we have to act within 30 days after an application comes in. Otherwise, it's deemed approved. So we always try to meet, even if we meet for the purpose. I think it is.
Okay.
I could be wrong, but I think we have to act within 30
We
days.
do have to act.
There has to be some kind of like stick. Otherwise, what's the point in having the
I
requirement?
don't know about that.
I don't know. That's what I think anyway. I could be wrong.
We're very good about scheduling things with you.
Okay. Any further business to come before the board at this time? Hearing none, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? We are adjourned. Thank you. And that is how we do.